you ever stop to think, why is it so hard to trust someone who's quiet? Why do those who stand in the spotlight often seem, deep down, to have less to say? And why is it that, in the end, the ones we consider boring always seem to be in control?
It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. That's from Machiavelli. And he didn't write lines to be ignored. We live in the age of fireworks, where everything explodes, dazzles, and disappears. The logic is simple. Those who aren't loud aren't seen. Those who aren't seen aren't remembered. And those who aren't remembered are disposable. But what if all of that is a lie? What if, silently, the true architects of power are precisely those who don't need to impress, the predictable, the consistent, the discreet? Those people you call boring, but who, in some strange way, always end up in command. These are the true alchemists of the everyday. They aren't worried about likes, trends, or the delusions of the moment. They cultivate something else, a power that isn't seen but is felt, a kind of authority that doesn't need to shout because it's firmly anchored in habit, discipline, and predictability. And no, this isn't an empty praise of monotony. It's a revelation. Have you ever envied someone who seems to have everything under control while you feel devoured by a whirlwind of stimuli and distractions? Have you wondered how some people maintain their focus while the world collapses around them? And have you noticed that, between the lines of history, it's these same people who shape the world? They understand a secret that few dare to face, that the extraordinary is born from the ordinary, that consistency outlasts explosive genius, and that the mind that can endure boredom is the one that masters chaos. Maybe that's why Machiavelli, when speaking about the game of power, never glorified the charmers, but the cunning. And the cunning, my dear listener, are almost never the most entertaining people in the room. They're the ones who listen, the ones who wait, the ones who observe you, while you're trying so hard to be noticed. Today we're going to explore this hidden dimension, where boredom becomes strategy, where predictability becomes a weapon, and where the boring, the ones the world underestimates, reveal themselves to be the true masters of the game. Take a deep breath, turn off the lights, and come with me. Have you ever noticed how hypnotized we are by charismatic people, the way they speak, gesture, how their words fill a room? It all seems magical. They walk in and suddenly everyone wants to hear what they have to say. We've been taught to believe this is the ideal profile of a leader, a true snake charmer, and of course we want to be like that too, because deep down we all fear irrelevance. But that's only the surface. Charisma can be magnetic, yes, but what almost no one tells you is that it can also be empty, inconsistent, fragile. See, charisma depends on constant presence, on keeping the shine alive. It's a performance, and every performance, no matter how seductive, has an expiration date, a fatigue that creeps in, even if silently. Machiavelli, the Renaissance thinker who understood power better than anyone, already warned us, those who win through charisma fall with time, those who win through cunning, they endure. The figure of the charismatic leader is like a castle built of mirrors, imposing but vulnerable to the smallest crack, because charisma needs a stage. It needs an audience. It must be fed by the gaze of others. But true power, that doesn't shout. It whispers, it repeats, it builds itself in silence. And that's where the boring ones come in. You know that person who doesn't need to be noticed, who doesn't shine but endures? The one you almost forget is there, but when something goes wrong, they're the one who fixes it? Exactly. They've understood what you're still trying to figure out. The truth is that the real world, the one that happens far from cameras, stages, and feeds, runs on consistency. And consistency is almost always mistaken for dullness. The consistent person doesn't give you a spectacle, they give you stability. And in a world collapsing emotionally, that is pure power. Charisma may win you over. Consistency will transform you. Look at historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, Rosa Parks, or even the Stoic Epictetus. None of them were known for flamboyance, but all of them were unshakable, profound, and for that, unforgettable. Modern culture, drunk on urgency, wants to convince you that being interesting matters more than being reliable. But it's a lie. Trust builds kingdoms, predictability soothes hearts, and true power is born from those who can stay the course, even when no one is clapping. It's easy to be charismatic when everything is going well. The hard part is holding steady when everything around you falls apart. And that's when the boring ones shine, because they are not improvising. They're following a plan you didn't even know existed. The world needs fewer fireworks, Amando. and more lighthouses. And lighthouses, my friend, don't dance. They illuminate, silently, tirelessly. Now let me ask you, do you want to impress the world for 5 minutes or influence it for a lifetime? Routine is where the extraordinary hides. It's there, in that space, so many dismiss that true strength is born. It may sound strange to think this way. After all, we live in a time where anything repetitive is seen as weakness, where consistency is mistaken for mediocrity. But there is a silent power in doing the same thing every single day. And Machiavelli, with his raw vision of human nature, knew this. When you think of the people you most admire, you might picture scenes of glory, charisma, and grand decisions. But almost always, what lies behind it is something far less exciting: discipline, repetition, a loyalty to the process. Habit, when well cultivated, is an invisible weapon. It shapes the mind, quiets the chaos, sharpens the will, and more than that, it builds inner structure. Machiavelli wasn't exactly talking about morning routines or healthy habits, but his work is infused with the logic of predictability, of mastering variables, of consistency as an instrument of power. At the core, what he understood, and what many still ignore, is that the unpredictable is conquered with method. The world isn't won by those who react to chance, but by those who act with constancy, even under pressure. And this is where the central point comes in. Routine is not a prison. It's a foundation. Those who master it, master themselves. And those who master themselves become far harder to manipulate. Look at the way we live, drowning in stimuli, addicted to novelty, to adrenaline disguised as productivity. Each new task distracts us from the last. Each new promise pulls us further from ourselves. And routine, by contrast, seems boring, almost humiliating. But that boredom hides a hidden gold, because real transformation doesn't happen in great leaps. It happens in the small steps taken every single day, even when no one is watching. Have you ever asked yourself what might happen if you simply did the same thing day after day, with calm, with focus, with dedication? Have you imagined that maybe you don't need a new goal, but simply a new pact with the obvious? Modern life wants to convince you that depth is a waste of time, but routine is, in truth, a deep dive. And the deeper you go, the more you realize you're not repeating, you're refining, you're purifying, you're becoming. There is something sacred about someone who performs the same act every day with presence. The monk who repeats the same mantra, the pianist who practices the same melody, the athlete who returns to the same track. They are not boring, they are dangerous, because they have found freedom within form. And freedom in this case isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about being who you are, even when everything around you changes. And you? Can you stay in the same place long enough to truly find yourself? Or are you still running, fleeing from boredom as if it were an enemy, when in truth it might be your teacher? Routine is power, and not the kind of power that shows off, but the kind of power that endures. Machiavelli understood human nature like few others. He didn't write to please. He wrote to reveal, with surgical coldness, the inner workings of power. And although his work has often been unfairly reduced to the image of the ruthless manipulator, there's a detail that escapes most superficial readings. Machiavelli knew that real power doesn't lie in display, but in consistency. Not in spectacle, but in silent strategy. That's why he would have had a secret respect for those we now call boring, those discreet, methodical, predictable figures. The ones who don't generate gossip, who don't dominate the spotlight, who may even seem socially disposable, and yet, when you look more closely, they are the ones who control the flow of decisions, the backstage of projects, the levers that keep the machinery of the world moving. Machiavelli would never have entrusted power to someone impulsive. He would have preferred the one who shows up at the same time every day, who speaks little but observes much, who doesn't seek to seduce but to understand. This type of person, the boring one, is not harmless. They are trained, they know how to wait, they act with precision. And most dangerous of all, they don't need to be seen to feel validated. While the charismatic ones live under the constant risk of falling from public grace, the discreet ones grow stronger in the shadows. They accumulate knowledge, they refine their decisions, and when they act, they don't waste energy on vanity. They go straight to the point. Machiavelli would have called this virtù, the ability to act effectively in the world, to shape events with intelligence and cold-blooded clarity. And virtù, in this case, is the sister of predictability, of discipline, of boredom embraced as a tool of power. The boring one is the person who has learned to renounce the delirium of novelty, who knows that shining for a second is easy. What's hard is building something that lasts a lifetime. What's hard is enduring the loneliness of being misunderstood while everyone else chases instant validation. And this is the point where Machiavelli and the boring ones meet. Both understand the value of time, both know the real world doesn't move to the rhythm of the feed, but to the rhythm of repetition. Both grasp that strength belongs to those who have patience, who master their impulses, who can appear harmless while silently preparing their next move. How many times have you underestimated someone quiet, simply because they weren't part of the show? And how many times did you realize too late that it was precisely that person who held the keys to what really mattered? Machiavelli taught us that appearances do matter, but substance matters more, and that true kings often don't wear visible crowns. They wear habits. They wear consistency. They wield silence as a shield and focus as a sword. The modern world despises the boring ones because it lives intoxicated by haste. But Machiavelli would have seen in them something rare, power without ostentation, and that, my friend, is the most dangerous and the most enduring bond form of power that exists. Consistency. Just hearing the word makes many people feel the weight of boredom. It seems old, outdated. In a world that worships speed, change, and novelty, being consistent almost sounds like a flaw of personality. But maybe, precisely because of that, consistency has become a secret form of power. To be consistent is to go against the grain. It's doing what needs to be done even when no one is watching. It's resisting the temptation to quit, to change direction at every obstacle. And this kind of persistence, silent, often invisible, builds more than any sudden burst of talent. It builds character, it shapes identity, and most importantly, it delivers results. The world rewards those who finish. And those who finish are almost always the ones who endured repetition, who endured being ignored, underestimated, criticized, but never stopped. Because deep down, they knew nothing flourishes consistently without first being watered in a boring, repetitive way. Consistent people are like pillars. They hold entire structures while the rest of the world is busy trying to get attention. They are the ones you might not notice at first. But over time, they become irreplaceable because they offer something almost no one else does: stability. And stability in an increasingly chaotic world has become a luxury. The consistent person doesn't panic in the face of change. They've been through it before. They don't get dazzled by shortcuts. They've seen too many shortcuts turn into traps. They keep going, one step at a time, without hurry, without fanfare. And because of that, they go further. Consistency is not about being rigid. It's about being committed. It's the opposite of impulsiveness. It's the refusal to live only for the now. It's the decision to plant in order to harvest, even if the harvest takes time. And that takes courage, because it's easier to start 1,000 things than to finish one. It's more comfortable to dream than to execute. It's more exciting to chase shortcuts than to walk the full path. But the consistent person already understands that what matters in the end is what lasts. And for something to last, someone has to persist. Someone has to bear the weight of the ordinary days. Someone has to resist the urge to give it all up at the first sign of difficulty. And that someone is almost always seen as boring, because they don't get easily distracted, because they don't change their mind with every breeze, because they prefer solidity over spectacle. Yet it's precisely this type of person who, over time, becomes a reference point, because they build something that doesn't depend on other people's approval, something that endures. Consistency has a hidden power. It transforms any gesture, no matter how simple it may seem, into the construction of something grand. Writing 1 page a day, meditating for 20 minutes, waking up at the same time, eating with awareness, listening before speaking. None of these attract attention, but all of them, done every day, change an entire life. Machiavelli would understand this. He, who saw power as something that must be cultivated with strategy and intelligence, would recognize in consistency an invisible trump card. Because true power isn't about looking strong, it's about being steady. And being steady in liquid times is a form of rebellion. So maybe in the end, consistency is an aesthetic choice, an existential stance, an act of faith. Not faith in immediate results, but faith in the process. faith in repetition as a path to transcendence. Because to repeat, deep down, is to refine, to purify, to transform doing into being. Consistency may not bring applause, but it builds something that cannot be bought nor faked, self-respect, and those who respect themselves are impossible to manipulate. In the end, perhaps the greatest strength really is the one we so often despise: predictability, repetition, what doesn't shine. We've been trained to chase intensity, to confuse noise with relevance, to believe that the more we show ourselves, the more we are. But everything we've seen so far reveals the opposite. True power lives in silence, in consistency, in what is built without rush but with presence. Those we call boring, also the ones who don't waver, who don't quit, who keep going even when everything seems chaotic, are in fact the true architects of the future. They don't need applause to continue. They don't need validation to exist. They know something the rest are still trying to figure out, that consistency is stronger than charisma, and that what is done in silence, with intention, lasts much longer than what is done just to be seen. Now Machiavelli would understand this. He, who watched kings fall to vanity and empires collapse for lack of structure, knew that the true art of power demands more consistency than genius, more patience than passion, more strategy than spectacle. So maybe the question we're left with is this: do you want to be remembered for what dazzled for an instant, or for what carried the impossible through an entire lifetime? Time has a silent way of revealing what really matters, and almost always it chooses the boring ones. You know, this video, this entire reflection, was born from a quiet discomfort that has followed me for years. For a long time I felt out of place. While everyone else seemed to be chasing shine, visibility, the next big achievement, I often found myself repeating the same routines, writing alone, immersed in thoughts no one had asked to hear, and at times, I'll admit, I thought I was falling behind. But as time went on, something started to change. I realized that the people I admired most in history, philosophers, leaders, artists, monks, had something in common. They weren't seeking enchantment, they were seeking depth. They weren't after attention, but alignment. And that's when everything shifted. I understood that living consistently, faithful to your own principles, even when no one applauds you, is one of the greatest proofs of strength that exists. And that maybe it's precisely this silent repetition that transforms an ordinary life into an extraordinary existence. So if you've made it this far, if you listen to every word, if you let yourself be touched by this idea that being boring can actually be a profound form of freedom and power, I thank you. Truly. Because maybe deep down you're also living with this same restlessness. Maybe you're also building something in the dark. And maybe all you needed to hear today is that it makes sense, that it has value, that one day it will be remembered. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It was an honor to share this silence with you. Now you've made it to the end. And look, if you survived this existential deep dive without checking WhatsApp, without opening Instagram, without giving in to the temptation of watching just one quick reel, congratulations. You're already part of the 0.0001% who managed to resist the dictatorship of instant dopamine. And because of that, I'm going to ask you something, with all the seriousness of someone who just spent nearly half an hour calling you boring as a compliment. If this video made sense to you, if it poked at a blind spot inside you, or even left you uncomfortably in silence, more like this video. Not because the algorithm needs it, it does by the way, but because it shows me I should keep creating this kind of content, even if it doesn't dance, explode, or come with a thumbnail screaming 7 reasons to take over the world. Oh, and drop a comment below. Have you ever felt boring because you were more consistent than everyone else? Have you ever been underestimated for not being the loudest one in the room? I read everything. Seriously. Sometimes at 2 a.m. with a cup of coffee in hand in the face of someone who's lived a little too long in silence. And if you're not subscribed yet, well, you're late. But that's okay. I'm consistent. I'll wait. Click that button, subscribe, hit the bell, and join us in this secret club of those who prefer depth over performance, of those who trade noise for presence, of those who believe a quiet life can echo for generations. And before you run off to the next viral video, let me tell you this. There's a video showing up on your screen right now. I'm not going to say what it's about. That would be too easy, but I guarantee you it will touch on something you didn't even know you were trying to hide from yourself. Click it. If you made it this far, it was made for you.